Hello everyone, today let's solve the problem number 1731, the number of employees which report to each employee. So what the question states here, we are tasked with finding the IDs and names of all the managers. So we have to find the IDs and names of all the managers, the number of direct reports for each manager as well. So the number of direct reports for each manager and the average age of those reports rounded to the nearest integer. So we have to find the IDs and names of all the managers, the number of direct reports for each manager and the average age of those reports rounded to the nearest integer. So this one we need to find accordingly with the requirement. So what are the requirements here? We have to return the result ordered by employee ID. This we have to keep in mind, and the output should have the following columns: employee ID, name, reports count, as well as the average age. You can clearly see here, this one I'm speaking of the output: employee ID, name, reports count, as well as the average age, right? So these are the four columns we should have in the output. That's what they have given in the question. So what we should do, we have already considered. We have to find the IDs and names of all managers, the number of direct reports for each manager, and the average age. These three things we have to find, right? Average age of what? Average age of those reports rounded to the nearest integer, right? These three things we need to find accordingly with the requirement. Requirement I have already said, we have to return the result ordered by employee ID. Means ordered by employee ID means either we can go with ascending order or descending order, right? We have to return the result ordered by employee ID. In this case, output they have clearly mentioned we have to order by ascending order, 1 followed by 2 followed by 3. Employee ID you can clearly see in the output. That's what they have mentioned, clearly mentioned, right? So the output should have the following columns. One thing, employee ID, name, reports count, and average age. You can clearly see here, right? This one columns I'm speaking of: employee ID, name, reports count, and average age, right? So I hope the question is completely clear. Let's come to the example. Let's discuss the example here. So here let's consider the example 1. As I've said, let's consider the example 1. Same thing you can consider for the example 2 as well. Let's consider the example 1 so that it will be easier to understand. And let's go with the, after considering example 1, after discussing the example 1, let's go with the approach, right? So here you can clearly see Hersey. I'm speaking of Hersey here, the first one, the employee ID 9. Hersey with the employee ID 9 is reported to by Alice. You can clearly see this Alice I'm speaking of is reported to by Alice, whose age is 41. You can clearly see Alice age is 41 here in this case. So Hersey reports to the Alice, whose age is 41, and also Bob, whose age is 36. Here Hersey reports to Alice as well as Bob. This one, Alice age is 41 and Bob's age is 36 in this case. Hersey has 2 direct reports. So I'll just give here in this case, Hersey has 2 direct reports, Alice and Bob, right? So the average age of the reports is here in this case 41 plus 36, age of the Alice and Bob. 41 plus 36 by 2 here in this case. So this will be around 38.5. Calculate this one. We will get 38.5. 41 plus 36, right? 77 by 2 we will get. So this will be 38.5, right? So 38.5, which is rounded to 39. So we have to round up to the nearest integer. That's what they have given in the question, clearly mentioned in the question. I have explained that one while explaining the question, right? So 38.5 we have to round off to nearest integer. So the output will be here in this case 39, right? So this is rounded to 39. So Winston, this one I'm speaking of, Winston with the employee ID 2, I'm speaking of Winston whose employee ID is 2, has no reports. So only Hersey appears in the output in this case. So Winston whose employee ID is 2 has no direct reports at all. So we will not be considering Winston in this case. We will be considering only Hersey, because Hersey has 2 direct reports, nothing but Alice and Bob in this case. We will be considering the age of Alice and Bob. that is nothing but 41 plus 36 by 2. We have so I'll not be doing this one again. Have done this one. So 41 plus 36 by 2, nothing but 77 by 2. Yes, 38.5. We have to round off to the nearest integer. This will be rounded to 39. So here in this case, we have to display in the output. In the question I have said we have to go with the column employee ID, name, reports count, as well as the average age, right? So for the Hersey, we have the employee ID of Hersey is 9. So this will be 9. Name is Hersey. Reports count is 2. Nothing but Alice and Bob. And average age, when we count, we got 39. That's what we need to return here, 39. I hope this is clear. Do the same thing. Consider the same thing for the example 2 as well. So you can consider the same thing for the example 2 as well, so that you will understand that one clearly. As I have explained example 1, just consider doing the same thing for example 2, right? So you will understand this one clearly. Now, as we are good to go with the approach, let's discuss the approach initially. As I have said, let's discuss the approach first and then let's write the query. Initially, as usual, let's discuss the approach. So here in this case, we will be going with a self join. Why we will be going with a self join? We can make use of the left join, right? So when I say self join, either we can go with the left join or we can go with the right join. So we will be going with the left join to join the employees table. We have to join the employees table at any cost with itself based on the reports to field. We need this one, right? So based on the reports to field, we will be joining the employee table. So we will be joining the employees table with itself by making use of the left join. So we can either make use of the left join or right join. We will be making use of the left join in this case. Why we will be doing that? Because it helps us to identify which employees are being reported to others. In this case, in the example that we considered, Hersey reported to Alice and Bob, right? Alice and Bob. So we need to check for every employee, right? We have to check for Winston also. Winston, I forgot. So we checked for Winston also, but Winston didn't report to any of the managers in this case, right? So we didn't consider Winston at all in the output. So Hersey directly reported to Alice and Bob in this case, right? That is the reason we'll go with the self join, right? I hope this step is completely clear. Now let's move on with the second step, nothing but grouping here. When I say grouping, we have to group by the manager ID. So why I am saying we have to group by the manager ID? Because we have to calculate the number of direct reports and their average age. So average age, why? They have clearly asked in the question average age. So Hersey reported to Alice and Bob, right? So Hersey reported to Alice and Bob here in this case. So Alice had some age, I think 41, and this one some around 36 something. I don't know. I don't know. So let's consider 41 and 36 average of this one age of Alice and Bob. We have to consider means 41 plus 36 by 2 in this case we have to do. So I think 41, 51, 61, 71. This will be 77 by 2, right? So that's what we got. 38.5 I think we got. In this case we rounded to the nearest integer, nothing but 39. That's what we will be doing by making use of grouping here. In this case, this is the second step. We have to group by the manager ID to calculate the number of direct reports and their average age. So that is the reason we'll be going with the grouping, right? So let's move on with the third step here, aggregation. When I say aggregation, we will be going with the count keyword. Why? We have to count the direct reports. So the number of direct reports in the previous step we already know. For the Hersey, the number of direct reports were 2. Nothing but Alice and Bob, right? So we are going, or we will be going with the count keyword here to count the direct reports. So we will be making use of the AVG or the average keyword. So that is provided by the SQL to compute the average age, and we will be making use of the round, this one keyword as well. Round because we have to round off to the nearest integer. We got 38.5, but in the output we need to display this one as 39. So round keyword is provided by the SQL. We have used it several times. If you have followed the previous tutorials, you will be knowing we have used this one several times, to round off to the two decimal places or to round off to the integer. We have made use of the round keyword several times. So we will be making use of the count keyword here to count the direct reports. We will be making use of average or avg keyword here, avg function or the keyword here, to compute average age and round it to the nearest integer. I hope this is clear. This is the third step, nothing but aggregation. In simple terms, we call this one as aggregation, right? Let's move on with the fourth step here, filtering. So filtering is easy. Basically what we do here is we will keep the records where the employee has at least one report. So in this case, we ignored Winston or Winston. I forgot the name. I'll go with the last one, third one, right? Winston, we ignored this one because Winston didn't have any direct reports, right? In this case, Winston didn't had any direct reports. So that's why what we did, we ignored Winston. So we considered Hersey because Hersey had two direct reports, nothing but Alice and Bob. So that is the reason we'll be going with the filtering here. We will keep only records where the employee has at least one report in this case. At least one report. So we were considering or we considered only Hersey in this case, who had direct reports for Alice and Bob. So this is fine. The final step here is sorting. After filtering, we have to sort. So why? In the question they have clearly mentioned based on the employee ID. So we have to sort this one in the ascending order. We saw that 1, 2 and 3 in the example 1, right? So that's what 1, 2 and 3 in the example 2. If you first I explained that itself. So sorting, we will be sorting or we will be making use of order by clause. Whenever we have to sort, we will be going with order by clause, right? So we will be going with the order by clause, or we will order the result based on the employee ID. We have already seen this one. This should be easier to understand, right? These are the 5 steps we'll be going with. This is the approach that we'll be going with. So here in this case, the first step here is self join. The second step here is grouping, and the third step here is aggregation, and the fourth step here is filtering, and the fifth step here is sorting. These are the 5 steps that we will be considering, right? So these are the 5 steps we'll be considering, or this is the approach that we will be going with. So as we are familiar with the approach, now it will be easier to write the query. Now let's start writing the query. So now let's start writing the query. Initially what we discussed, we have to find the managers, count reports, and we have to calculate the average age. So let's start writing the query. I'll just make use of the select keyword here. Select e.employee ID. Employee ID, this is coming from the employees table. I'll just copy this one here in this case. So let me paste it over here. So this one, nothing but the manager's ID we have to consider, right? So I am going with e.employee ID here. Next we have to go with the manager's name as well. In this case, we had this one Alice and Bob direct reports from the Hersey. Hersey directly reported to the managers, this one Alice and Bob, right? So we have to consider the manager's name as well. So I'll just go with here in this case e.name, right? So e.name. So the next step is we have to count the number of direct reports. So I'll just go with the count keyword. You would have already guessed this one. I'll be going with the count keyword that is provided by the SQL. So I'll just go with all.employee ID. So I'll just copy the employee instead of typing here. Let me copy this one and paste it over here. This one, right? So employee ID, as we are considering the reports count. So in this case, so let me count. Let me type here. This will be reports underscore count, right? So the next step, we have to round off to the nearest integer. So in the example 1, if you would have observed, we got 38.5 here in this case. So here you can clearly see we got 38.5, which is 39. After rounding it to the nearest integer, we have to round it off to the nearest integer. That's what they have given here, right? So that one, so let me do one thing here. Let me go to the next line here from as here. This one. This is fine as reports count, or from the count itself. Let me go to the next line. So this is fine as report count, and we have to find the average age of direct reports, that is rounded. I'll just go with round keyword here. So we have already discussed that we will be making use of average of age, right? So this will be average of r dot age. So I'll just give here in this case as this will be average age, right? So average age, where is average age? So this, let me copy the same thing here, this one, and let me paste it over here. This is fine. So this is it. Next, these things are coming from where? These things are coming from the employee table. So employees table, right? So let me copy this one and let me make use of the from keyword here. Employees E, let me consider employees E. If you remember the approach that we discussed during the approach, so I said in the first step itself, I said we'll be making use of the left join, right? So we will be making use of the left join or the self join to match the manager with reports, right? So I'll give here left join employees are on E dot employee underscore ID here r dot reports underscore to here. So we made use of the self join to match manager with reports, right? Reports to here in this case, where so we need to keep only those who have at least one report. This one we have already discussed. So we had ignored Winston because Winston didn't report to any manager here in this case, right? Winston didn't report to any manager. Here reports to is given null. Strictly they have given null. So we are ignoring this one. In this case, Hersey is directly reporting to Alice and Bob, right? Alice and Bob. So we were considering Hersey. So we need to keep only those who have at least one reports in this case. So we need to implement or articulate that thing in the form of query. So I'll just give here where r dot employee ID we have to consider, right? Here I'll just copy the same thing. Employee ID as it shouldn't be null. At least one direct report has to be there, right? Here in this case is not null keyword I'll make use of, right? So I'll just make use of the not null keyword is not null. So if you remember, I also said that we will be going with a group by. So we will be grouping based on the manager's ID and name. We discussed this one in the approach. So I'll just be making use of group by keyword here. Group by e dot employee ID. I'll just copy the entire thing here. Employee ID. So here I'll just let me paste it over here, and we will be grouping by manager's ID and name, right? So here I'll just go with e dot name. This is fine. Finally, we have to sort this one based on ascending order. So let's come to the example 2 here. In this case, you can clearly see we have to sort this one based on the employee ID, right? Ascending order. In the ascending order 1, 2, 3. Here, this one you can clearly see 1, 2, 3, right? So this one will be employee name. So let's order this one. So order by here e dot employee underscore ID. E dot employee underscore ID. So we are ordering by manager's ID basically. So that's what we are doing here. So this is it for the query. Let me hit the run button. I hope this works. Let's see. So here you can clearly see the sample test cases are getting passed. So let me hit the submit button quickly. So you can clearly see here all the test cases are getting passed. Means the query works absolutely correct on this case. So here I hope whatever the query that we have written is completely clear as well, right? For now, this is it. Thanks for watching, guys.